Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Hack the Planet podcast. The only podcast where you can learn to hack like an Egyptian. We are joined. That is so much worse. We are joined today by professional Red Teamer and volunteer for the National CCDC Red Team, Egypt.
Hello.
And, hello, Egypt. I sincerely apologize
Welcome.
for the joke. We're also joined by our usual panel. We've got Mitchell.
Evening, everyone.
Hey, we got Max.
Hey, how's it going?
And we've got Virus.
Hello.
Hey. So thanks for joining us, Egypt. I definitely want to get into what the CCDC competition is, especially at the national level. I'm super interested in that. But first, since we ask everybody, I'm very curious. So how did you get into sort of InfoSec in the first place?
Well, so my first programming language was BASIC on a calculator because I had calculus class in high school and was bored with the class and would rather be playing Dope Wars. So I started with BASIC, and learning little bits of programming led to a computer science interest. So I went to college for a computer science degree and met a bunch of hackers there. And that was really the first time I had played much with any kind of security thing. I'd sort of seen hacking on the side when I was in high school, but never really got into it until college. And that was lots of late nights owning people over the Wi-Fi at the 24-hour restaurant. And so that was where I first really got into security. And then that led to a career in research and more programming and now pen testing.
Awesome. So it's actually, it seems like there are a lot of people who didn't go to school for computer science, working in security. So that's it's an interesting arc. I also had a minor in psychology, and if things had turned out differently, I might have gone into studying brains instead of computers. I imagine you. Do you end up using the psychology knowledge in pen testing?
Not really in a practical way. The thing that I think is probably the most useful out of that studying was recognizing biases. And that's a lot more useful in just general life than it is in computer science or InfoSec or anything technical in particular.
Imagine that when doing like code reviews or something like that, you can sort of apply that sort of knowledge to sort of like get code smells or things like that a little bit easier, maybe.
For sure, there's some things that are useful just in sort of a social context,
Mm-hmm.
where recognizing things like, if you put someone into a certain frame of mind, they're going to react in a predictable way. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. And things like, I'm very careful when I'm writing my reports or when I'm used to be working on lots of pull requests and stuff. I never use the word easy or simple or basic or things like that.
Trivial is another one.
Trivial,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because it puts people off and it makes people think, oh shit, this is simple, or you think this is simple, I'm fucking up. Things like that can shift the focus away from the work and onto some bullshit that doesn't matter,
Yeah. No, nobody wants to like deal with the ego hit or anything like that. We just want to fix bugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Man, I always screw stuff like that up because like it's so hard for me to put myself. It's like a cognitive empathy black hole. Like I'd never use the word trivial if I can avoid it for the same reasons that you guys said. But like simple to me, like I know that some people mean it to mean easy, but it doesn't mean easy. So like I often use the word simple, like even in corporate writing, to mean simple, as in has few parts.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Not
like
complicated.
And yeah, I wonder how many times I've wanted to say that specifically and not had another word for simple rather than just writing not complicated, which looks weird. That has like had that effect on someone.
So
Well,
I used.
sometimes there's no way around it.
I gotta ask too. I wrote calculator games in high school, but there was that like ski game. I had like a TI-82 or something like that. So I gotta wonder what calculator did you have had BASIC on it?
TI-83 had BASIC.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yep.
I had an 89 and it straight up had a port of Final Fantasy 7 on it.
oh
Yeah,
shit!
They have a C compiler for TI-89s, so you could just write
Fuck.
straight C for TI-89.
Yeah.
Oh man, I missed out. So yeah, I used to write little games too and like share them with my friends. So I made a kind of version of an RPG, and one of my friends changed all the text out, so it was all about like being a pimp or whatever. So I made some like RPG game where you like randomly roll a character and then you'd go around like fighting random monsters on this little map. It was kind of like Rogue, you know. I made a roguelike for the 82.
Nice.
And then he made it all X-rated, and then it actually got really popular after that point at the school. Whereas, yeah, more or less. Like no one wanted to play my version, but like everyone wanted to play his version. So anyway,
Star Wars, man.
yeah. So how'd you get into CCDC? Was that sort of before or after professional pen testing?
We should actually say what CCDC is.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. What is CCDC?
So CCDC, the name is the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, and it's a competition between teams of college students who get together to be a blue team against professional pen testers as the red team. And Virus and I are both on that team. For the Nationals, I've also participated in the Southwest Regionals, and I've helped out with some of the other regionals in the like, not actually during the competition, but like working on code and things for tools and stuff for other regions as well. I think there are 10 regions. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Virus. And they each field a team into the Nationals, so whoever wins their region goes to the national game. Each of the student teams will get a network that's all set up identical to each other team. The red teamers see the network at exactly the same time as the blue teamers. So we plug in, we have network access at exactly the same time that they do when the game starts, which leads to having to be very, very fast with your first shells. So part of the game is getting in. And that's a very important part. But from the red team perspective, persistence is even more important. It's very important to get in. It's very important to get those first shells and those first creds. But you're fighting human IDS. These blue teamers are eyes on screen, hands on keyboard the whole time. It's not like in a pen test engagement where, you know, maybe an IDS fires an alert, maybe somebody sees it, maybe they don't. You might have a week before anybody notices. You know, that's not the case in CCDC. You've got minutes before someone notices. So persistence is really, really important because they're going to kick you out of your first shells.
So is that like, do you think this is like helps you practice useful skills for professional pen testing, or is it like a totally different sport because of that?
I think there's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of stuff that I think doesn't apply in either direction, right? So from a pen tester's perspective, I'm working on tools and I'm using stuff that I can definitely go back and forth. It's useful in CCDC. It's useful in an engagement. On the other hand, there's things that I rarely need persistence on an actual engagement. Most of the time, I'm on a 1 week engagement, and persistence doesn't matter because at the end of the week, I got to shut everything down anyway. And then the flip side of that is from the CCDC side, I get to burn shit to the ground, which I never get to do on a real pen test, right? I'm not going to walk into a customer network and RMRF a box. So there's stuff that happens in one that doesn't work in the other.
Well, that was one thing I was going to say is it's actually useful. It's a good way to stay current sometimes on like talking about biases. I mean, we were talking about that earlier. Like it's like because like when you're like there are things you can leverage when you're doing CCDC stuff that like you can't leverage in the real world, and it shifts. Like there's some things that are valuable in both contexts, but like they're way more valuable in one versus the other. Like persistence is still valuable on a pen test to some degree, especially if it's fileless. But like most of the time, you can't do like file-based persistence on a professional engagement because like you can't modify the data, right? Like you can write simulated things that index a file as if it were ransomware, but you can't just straight up run ransomware, right? As opposed to CCDC, where like being quiet is almost useless. Because like you said, like there's someone looking, like there's like 9 times out of 10, there's someone literally staring at Wireshark, like on the box that you're going after. So like being quiet is pretty pointless. It's almost better to like smash everything as fast as possible and then oftentimes actually ransom a box. Be like, I have this one, I will give you guest access on the other one back if you give me root on this thing. Like these things actually happen.
Talking to the students is hilarious too.
Oh my god, I love it.
You talk to the students like while this is happening or after?
We can't walk into the room. We can't physically interact with them. We can, through the machines that we've compromised, leave them messages.
This is very common. Like very, very common.
So like what kind of messages?
That just
I have a
reminds me of
shotgun.
1990.
Like, yeah, like back orifice.
No, like you load TextPad in front of them, and like they type on TextPad and you type on TextPad, and like this is not rare.
Yeah.
So
Good times.
Is it like mind games, or you try to give them helpful tips, or what's the tone?
I mean, it depends on the team, because sometimes we've had things like a student will bring up Notepad and say, "Please give me my password back." That happens. Sometimes it'll be we've had them talk shit. That's relatively common. Yeah, it runs the gamut, man.
It's worth noting that like, Dave, the guy that runs the Red Team, like he tries to he puts a lot of work into like making sure that all the factors of hardness are very sufficiently randomized so that you don't get like advantages, right? So like we don't even know who the teams are. All the teams are given random numbers every time. It's all shuffled. But
yeah, I really like that about the game, actually. That's probably one of my favorite things about it, is the fact that we work very hard to make sure that we're as fair as possible.
Yeah, but all I was going to note is that like there's obviously like no two humans are identical with anything, and so this includes like different skills when it comes to the cyber dark arts, as it were. And like you'd be pretty hard pressed to find anyone who's not like, yeah, your team's probably going to do fine, but like don't get Mubix and Egypt's team, then you're probably it's like the 2 of them on one team, and it's usually like, well, we know what team's going to get removed. It's whichever team they get.
We've had a couple of close calls, man. We had a second place team once.
As far as the collegiate side, is it all undergrads, or is it also grad students and things like that?
It's all undergrads, from what I understand.
Okay. Awesome.
Did you play as an undergrad on the blue team?
It didn't exist when I was in college.
Yeah, right on. Well, what's funny is that the original Capture the Flag contests, so people have heard of CTFs now, they talk about CTFs. The original CTFs were this format, where people would start with, there would be a blue team to start with an image to defend, and then people would attack it, right? And now CTF has kind of morphed to mean more like a series of puzzles.
Yeah, the Jeopardy style.
The Jeopardy style CTF. And it's like some company will do an internal CTF, and it's like really kind of just trivia questions. Or like DEFCON CTF prequels are basically the trivia style.
Yeah.
So it's
Which I've always wondered about that. Like, I played in the CTF, the DEFCON CTF several times, and the quals are basically nothing like the game.
yeah.
It's a scale thing. It's a scale thing.
Yeah.
Like way easier and way more people, and it's way crazier play quals than but yeah,
I totally understand why they do it that way.
Yeah.
I just don't think that it represents the people who are most qualified to play in the game.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean,
a lot of the qualification challenges are like Secret Squirrel. I know Daniel's not here, but that's his like least favorite type of puzzle is where it's like, well, you just really had to sort of intuit whatever the puzzle designer wanted you to like think. Like I remember I was doing one year that was like, oh yeah, you just had to set the language setting to like this obscure language, and there was no indication that it was a multilingual site whatsoever. Like all the other pages were in English.
Yeah.
Like even if you were to fuzz that.
Well, the second time I ever played CTF was actually with Egypt, and it was amazing. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think your second one I think was my third, or maybe.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
because we were on different teams that played quals, and you guys qualified like one spot above us,
Yep.
and then somebody above dropped out, and then you guys had a bunch of people who like wanted to play quals but couldn't actually come to the event, and so there was this like, hey, are you guys down to like just merge since we're gonna play now?
I'm curious, like, so you said you had a team play second at some point. So I'm actually really curious when, I know you guys usually win, and I definitely want to hear some funny war stories about like stomping poor college kids at some point. But I'm really curious about like when you don't do so well against the blue team, what is the blue team doing? You know, like what do you see the most successful blue teams do, especially these days?
Firewalling. It's 100% firewalling. Assume that every box is evil and firewall the shit out of everything. Those are the teams that win.
Yep, that makes sense.
So is that like their first move is get the firewall up, and then basically
well, yeah. It's actually worth noting that there's been some significant evolution in tactics of the game and some play when it comes to like the rules and the scoring in response to that, because like it used to be that like teams figured out that it like nothing on the box mattered because the score bots were so thin that they would just ping, and if that box is up then it's okay. So you know, kids are smart, so they would do stuff like break a web app so that it's like literally unusable and then freeze it in place, or make like a read-only file system, right? And have these very stoic things. And then they started making the score things more interactive. They introduced concepts like the orange team, which are like fake dumb users that'll call you and ask you to do stuff. And, you know, so all of a sudden they took that away. So then, you know, in combination with just extreme, like people would walk in, immediately pull their network and then plug it back in slowly, was the reboots, right? Where like teams would they'd walk in, the first thing they do is image all of their boxes, so they'd be compromised, but like only to a certain degree, and then they would just reboot them every 10 seconds. So nothing you did matter. And then they started making point penalties for people. So it's like there's been some evolution of like people gaming the game.
Yeah. So the score bots are like over the years there are various sorts of things that contact. You know, the blue team gets an instance or a network, and they have to keep the network up because the score bots are like routinely trying to call services on the network. And if the services are not responsive, you don't get points, more or less, right? So, so you can't just firewall everything or unplug your machine. You've got to keep things up and running while also locking it down. So how have the score bots been working most recently?
So some of it is as simple as Virus just mentioned. They just check that the service is up. So those are becoming rarer, thankfully. And the service check bots tends to actually interact with the service. So like if SSH is a scored service it has to actually give a shell to proper creds. If HTTP is a service, it's real dicey. Sometimes that means that it actually checks the application under the web server. Sometimes it's just a service check, like does it respond to the 200? So I feel like the web checks are a lot less robust than the other kinds of checks right now, but some of that is just the way the web seems to work. We have a lot of pretty much every game the blue team will have an e-commerce site. There's some sort of thing that allows customers to buy shit. Those sites are complex, right? Writing the scorebot for it takes time. There's sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they can replace the whole thing with static HTML and it still looks close enough to the bot that it works.
They're also starting to do flags now, which is interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. This last couple of games, they've had flags where after we compromise something, we can drop a flag on the file system somewhere and steal something from a file system somewhere, or write a registry key or something along those lines, something to prove that we had access. And the moment those flags happen, we get credit for having compromised it. And then that has nothing at all to do with the service checks. So I really like that they added that in, and it's made a big difference, I think. So I really like the service checks when they're good, and I really like the flags that they've added since in the last couple of games they've had those.
So do those two scores get crunched together somehow? Like, were you compromised or not, combined with were your services responsive?
Yes. I'm not 100% sure how that algorithm works. All I know is that we get credit for compromising stuff. It reduces the blue team's score when we do so. And we get major points for stealing important data. So we get some amount of points for compromising a system at all. We get some amount of points for gaining root access on a system. We gain a much larger set of points for stealing credit cards or social security numbers or things like that.
So are the red team points compared with the blue team points, or are you like playing against the other red teams, or is this just to track and your real payment is like undergrad tiers?
Right. Right. So there's a couple of different things to that. The blue teams have their own points for their uptime and dealing with their injects, so injects are where the company comes to the team and says, hey, I need this to happen for the business to continue working, da-da-da-da-da. And they have to perform those actions and write a report about it. Those are the injects. So they get a lot of points for those.
Those are like those happen throughout the whole game, right?
Right.
It's like every few minutes. It's like the CEO wants a report on this. Okay, you have to install this software. Here's the thumb drive. It's like a whole other dimension to the game. Is like they're not just keeping their network safe from us. They're also like they're like running a company while they're keeping a network safe.
How long do they have to set up in the to start with? Like, do they have like a half hour or
they get a pre-brief.
Zero bagel?
They get a pre-brief where the scenario is explained to them, but they don't have access to keyboards until day of at the same time as we do.
Wow. So like the strategy would be to just like unplug for the first half an hour. You're going to lose the points, but like at least you're not. You
get increased point penalties for SLA violations the longer they go on.
And that's because that's exactly what every team used to do. The teams that they used to win, they would exactly do that. They'd come in, they'd yank everything and be like, we're just going to take the point hit and not put it online until we understand it.
Yeah. And I mean, at least to just put up a basic firewall, right?
So is that disincentivized now? Like, is the point penalty bad enough people don't do that?
It is.
Oh wow. Okay.
So if you were playing the blue team at next year's Nationals, what would your first 10 minutes be? Or what would you bring with you as preparation. You know, kind of like if people play like World of Warcraft, not World of Warcraft, but like Warcraft 3 or whatever, where StarCraft, where there's like some you build these buildings in this order for the optimum curve. You know, I forget what they call it. Like what is your version of that for a blue team? Like, what is the optimum, you know, starting of the game?
I honestly don't know. I'm not blue team, man.
Respect.
They actually keep changing the game to keep it hard to answer that question. Like a whole nother dimension we haven't even talked about because it's not very old, it's pretty recent, is like the kids can actually do incident reports now. So like if they find an implant and they find a compromise, there's like a whole, it's like part of the game but not part of the game because it's written by like the white team, which are like the referees. They actually have like a form that they can fill out with like a compromise report, and like you can, like, points that red team takes away from you, you can get a percentage of them back if you like actually analyze, if you do DFIR, basically if you actually analyze the attack and like quantify the threat and explain it well, then you actually get a significant chunk of those points back. So that's like a whole new dimension that's like a thing now.
Wow,
that's awesome.
So
It's getting really.
It's important because like we didn't used to pack stuff. Like Egypt will tell you, like we spent all like, you know, years, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 right before the game happened, like just gluing crap into shell scripts because like, well, we weren't worried about stuff getting reverse engineered, and now it's like, oh crap, like they're at least gonna run strings on it, and like they might like fire up procbot, and like if you're not careful, your shit might end up in a report. Like,
yeah, that's another thing too. They take a PCAP of the whole damn game, and Raytheon gets a piece of it. I think they give it to the. I think they give it to sponsors too. If you want a PCAP, you can get it.
So you say the whole game. I don't think, or I may have missed it. How long are we talking about in terms of like actual sort of red versus blue action?
I think the whole thing is about 16 hours. It's 2 days.
Okay.
It's pretty intense, but it's not too bad. Definitely done some CTFs where it's been like 36 hours, and you're like, why is this?
it's basically 36. I mean, like when you're not at the keyboard, you're like analyzing what went wrong and checking.
Okay, so it's 16 hours, like,
and the kids are
2 8-hour days.
Yeah, the kids are like checking their own logs and being like, what, you know, how do we think we did? And they're like formulating strategies based on, now they know what the scenario is. What are we going to do tomorrow? Like it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'll kick it back to Egypt, but like I feel like it's at least as intense as like actual DEF CON CTF. Maybe not as technically involved, but like it's pretty intense.
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly different from DEF CON CTF, but there's a lot going on, and it's 2 8-hour days. They chunk it up, but there's still like. They have to keep shit online for 8 hours twice. And it's a lot, man.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to give the blue team any helpful advice. But I've been hearing good things about Blue Spawn.
Yeah.
Has that impacted you at all?
What's Blue Spawn?
So Blue Spawn is a tool written by one of the Nationals, one of the teams that features in Nationals quite regularly, and it basically watches Windows processes for any kind of injection and just kills the shit out of everything.
Partially, a more specific way to explain it is, you know, the Hashirazad PE bear thing, where it uses pointer math to basically find injected code in processes. This does that and has like a button where like you can run it in that mode and it'll also kill anything that has that stuff in it. So it's like a shotgun for in like processes with injected shit in it, and it's pretty good.
Pretty awesome.
It makes a lot of standard Windows tools very difficult to use.
Oh, like attack tools, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. So, like, a interpreter in migration is going to A, fail, and B, get your shell killed.
So That was so Virus just mentioned Hasherazad's PE Bear, and we'll have a link to that and Blue Spawn in the links section. So you mentioned Meterpreter. Do you use Metasploit a lot at or either professionally but or at CCDC?
Both, I do. It's no longer my main tool. It was for a long time. Having written a bunch of the code in it, it was kind of the only tool I used for a long time because I was elbow deep in it all the time. Now I'm using a lot more tools. I'm not trying to shoehorn everything into Metasploit now. But yeah, I still use Meterpreter on engagements because it's still one of the most effective tools for just doing network shit on target. Having a free SOX proxy that just works most of the time is still one of the most useful things that you can have on a network. So yeah, I definitely still use it. And going back to the previous conversation of DEF CON quals, I saw Meterpreter come up in a DEF CON quals question several years ago. There was I don't remember the name of but this was 4 or 5 years ago, where they had a binary that you had to download, and it was supposed to be like, all they gave you was, here's a binary. And it turned out to be a Meterpreter binary, and the first thing it did was connect back and give a shell to their server. And from that point, it ran a script where it would check to see if there was a mic on the system, and if it did, or if it did not, it would just crash itself. Then it would record for 10 seconds, and then check to see if there was a webcam, and if there wasn't, it would crash. If there was, it would take a screenshot. And it did all these different checks, and then it wrote a key to wrote a flag to a registry key, and then shut down. So I had to spend like a significant chunk of time reverse engineering this Meterpreter binary that ran a script, and it was really fucking frustrating. Like, this is my own tool, you jerks. You're making me reverse engineer my own damn tool. But yeah, I definitely still use it. And on CCDC, it has some of the same advantages of the reasons I use it on engagements. It's quick network access for an easy SOX proxy. It's pretty standard, and you can get it in a whole bunch of different formats, which is important in CCDC, maybe even more than in a standard engagement, because sometimes I need to run something on Linux, sometimes I need to run something on Windows, and just having standard shellcode that works everywhere is really useful in that scenario. So yeah, I definitely still use Metasploit all over the place, for sure.
You said you contributed code to Metasploit. Was it? Did you wrote part of Meterpreter, or what? What all did you put in Metasploit?
So I started contributing little patches to Metasploit in 2006, and that was when I was working as a researcher doing binary exploitation.
Was it still Perl based back then, or was this still Ruby?
It was right when it was first Ruby, so it had been partially ported, but there were still tons of bugs. So I was fixing those bugs so that I could use it to write my exploits.
Basically, Metasploit as anyone knows it.
Right.
Right at the beginning. Cool.
Yeah, so it had just had the first major release as Ruby when I started working on it. So I started with just little patches. Eventually, I got commit access. I wrote my first module that was just my own, that was public, was browser autopwn, which was kind of a ripoff of the malware of the time, the crimeware of the time, putting together a bunch of browser exploits into a single thing. So it would combine a whole bunch of browser exploits into one module that you could run, and have any kind of browser that it knew how to exploit would pop a shell just from opening this one link. As opposed to before that, you had to have each exploit running on its own separate port, or it was a big pain in the ass. So that was sort of my first major thing that I did with it. And I did a DEF CON presentation about that one too.
That was a big deal for a while. Like when Beef picked it up, like that module in Beef, that I remember when they added it to the config, that there was like a good year where it was like that was how you got shells on whatever engagement. Like,
Yeah, dude,
you'd SEM to Beef. Beef would run autopwn, and then you'd just wait for your shells to come back. Like that was just what you did. Like no one did anything else.
Yeah, I mean that shit plus Karma was like it was shells on everything in all the airports.
Yeah.
All the coffee shops.
Yeah, it was nonstop, man. I remember that.
Yeah, it was silly. It was silly. Those were the days.
There was some exploit kit that malware was using that had a really distinctive name that I can't remember that did that, where it had a thing of JavaScript that like detected what browser you were.
Oh, and I stole a bunch of that shit straight up. I stole a bunch of that straight out of some crimeware.
Do you remember what that was? Do you remember what the crimeware was called? It's on the tip of my tongue.
There was a bunch of them. There was a shitload. There was Crime Pack. There was MPack. There was Fire Pack. There were a whole bunch of them. Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head.
It was kind of the precursor to like the JS, like Bitcoin miner, right? It was like before they were all just miners, they were shell getters, and exactly. That was how they ran, right?
Yeah. So my favorite thing about that whole scenario was I stole a bunch of shit straight from the crimeware, and then like 6 months later, I started seeing my code in crimeware. So I stole from them, and then they stole right back.
Well, they were like, "Hey, someone else is maintaining this now."
Right, pretty much. Yeah, that was kind of a I have arrived kind of moment when I started seeing my code show up in actual malware being used for crime. Like,
so
one appreciates me.
So you guys mentioned Beef. If people aren't familiar with Beef, it's still useful. It stands for the Browser Exploitation Framework. Basically, if you can get an injection into someone's browser, it'll like call back to you and kind of give you you can get a shell into the browser on someone else's machine, and you can just like type your JavaScript in and try various things, and like there's different tools you can run. But I've actually used that myself to man-in-the-middle embedded devices that make that use maybe like an embedded WebKit or something to do web requests. If you can get in the middle of those, you can actually get a shell into an embedded WebKit, and WebKit, as we all know, is full of bugs. So I've actually had a lot of luck using Beef, even relatively recently, against maybe things that aren't quite updated.
Well, that combo of Beef and autopwn, specifically Egypt's autopwn specifically, is actually A, still super relevant, but B, it's become really relevant even recently with IoT devices, because there's a lot of old, like, for one reason or another, it's either difficult or not practical or flat out impossible to patch like IoT stuff, where what the user actually sees is ultimately a web interface. It's just restricted to localhost. And so you only figure out a way to like, you find like the one way it reads data from the internet, and you man in the middle it, and because the SSL fails open because nobody wants their stuff to fail close and then become like a brick, right? You like put like burp,
or it's not on or it's not on SSL at all.
Yeah, or it's not on SSL.
Yeah, usually.
Right. You like put, you inject whatever, you get your one Beef hook and then run autopwn, and because inside the IoT device it's still like 2001.
Yeah. Well, the other
still work because none of that's been patched.
That's exactly. I got one of my biggest wins ever that way. But also I mentioned WebKit specifically because WebKit has one of those GPL licenses where you are legally required to publish the code you change in it. So people have their like stupid forks of WebKit where they've made tons of bad decisions and not fixed any bugs, and then they have to put that code up somewhere. So like my big trick is you just go to their GPL published code and look through their pathetic fork of WebKit, and you're like, oh yeah, type confusion everywhere.
So you just do it
Great.
Like look at the patch difference and go, oh, there's the bug.
Yeah, no, I literally, I'm like, okay, you forked WebKit like 6 years ago. Like, we'll just look through all the CVEs and WebKit since then and pick out one we like, right? It's like, that seems hard. Too hard. Oh, there we go. That's easy. Yeah, I'm all about being extremely lazy in a tactical way. But so all right, I know you guys have a bunch of these, but I'm dying to ask. So what are the funniest things you've done to blue teams over the years?
Man. So one of my favorite stories was there was a bind server that I was just fighting back and forth for access to this thing. I would compromise it, they would kick me out. I would compromise it again, etc. It just went on all day. And finally, I just got fed up with it, and I was like, fuck it. If I can't have this box, nobody can. And I RM'd it. But I didn't consider the fact that bind doesn't need a file system. It doesn't give a shit if there's no files. It just keeps on serving DNS. Bind doesn't care.
It's already loaded all the zone files into memory.
So they continued scoring points for it. And I was like, well, fuck, now I can't even kill the process because kill is gone. So they kept their bind service up, and it continued to score points for them until they got an inject. And I didn't find this out until I talked to them later in the debrief. They got an inject where they had to add some records to the zone. And they're like, well, there's no fucking file system. We can't do that. So they revert the image. And I was like, okay, I'm back in. They reverted it. I'm back in. So I get in and I start looking around. I'm like, okay, what can I do now? And suddenly, like, my commands stop working. Like, command not found. They RM'd it themselves. They made the change. They restarted bind, and then they RM'd it. They're like, it worked before. It worked when you did it. We'll do it too. So they ran bind with no file system.
It's amazing.
Oh man.
One of my favorite, like, oh man, we fucked ourselves stories was like back when sticky keys was new.
Yep.
Like we all kind of knew about it, but we weren't like super pro like at deploying it. But like Egypt and Mubix, like they had it, and then like I think Nickerson and them had it, and they were like super pro. So they like, I remember, I don't know if you were the messenger or if you had a hand in it, but like I remember getting a thumb drive from you that like had it all packaged up as like a pretty little like just do this. And like that year, that was like the thing for Windows boxes. It was like we got to sticky key them all because they were very RDP heavy. So that was like our go-to, like when they kick out your shell, just RDP back in and open a new one. And I remember early day 2 that year, we reached a point where like most of the teams were completely locked down, and we started spotting who the more talented teams were because they had figured out that we had sticky keyed them, and they had like researched the attack over the day break. So when they came back, they were using sticky keys to get back into boxes that they didn't have access to anymore, and we're like reverting changes. Oh no!
Awesome.
That was good times.
I'm trying to remember the year, like there was like the Solaris something, and like no one, it was like Black Team broke it and no one could figure out how to even get it to function. And then like in the middle of the day, you were like, I got it, and like had some that
was the dash F root one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where you had like pulled the bug off of like some text file site or some junk, and we're like, and then, like filed it off the internet and like got it to work.
Good times.
I mean,
ancient Solaris box.
Well, it doesn't have to be ancient. Like ancient bugs worked on Solaris up until a couple of years ago. There was Solaris had a buffer overflow in login that got fixed like 3 or 4 years ago.
Wasn't that Wasn't that a King Cope bug? Yeah.
Solaris.
There's a lot of variants of like LD preload bugs that I ended up using a long time ago.
Yeah.
So actually, I was going to ask. So the blue team, do they predominantly get Windows machines, or is it a variety? It sounds like there was some Solaris.
Yeah, it's a pretty big variety. They always have a Windows domain, although how much it's actually used in the game is kind of dicey. I wish they would do some more with their Active Directory, honestly. The team that builds the network infrastructure and everything uses Active Directory, but not super extensively. So their Windows machines don't always have to be domain joins to like work, which is kind of frustrating for a pen tester who spends all day messing with Windows on Active Directory. And they always have some form of Unix. There's usually a couple of different kinds of Linux, and then there's something oddball. It's been FreeBSD, it's been Solaris, it's been OpenBSD, it's been NetBSD. I don't think we've seen any AIX, but I wouldn't put it past them.
No HBucks?
No, we haven't seen any Xbox.
HPucks.
No, I haven't seen any of that either. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see some weird esoteric Linux or Unix. I mean, but yeah, there's always some Linux, there's always some Windows, and then there's usually something weird.
There was a year where like they had some weird distro that they had compiled custom for a Raspberry Pi, and they like duct taped it under the desk, and it turned out that it was running like MySQL, and then they federated access to like a Windows box. So like even the blue team thought that their like Windows box was their database, and it turned out to be like the Raspberry Pi duct taped under the table that like no one.
Yeah.
So does the red team start with like the same network the blue team does, or do you have to figure everything out by scanning, or how does that go?
We have a cable. They give us a cable. That's it.
So what do you?
Your uplink. Go.
What do you do to prepare for this?
Well, there's a fairly large infrastructure team on our side. We have several people who work throughout the year for building up the networking infrastructure for us, for the red team side, so that we can plug into the white team infrastructure and be able to randomize our IP so that we're not always coming from the same location. We have our own score management stuff so that we can deal with our reports, because we have to report every compromise too. The blue team has to deal with those, but we have to report about them. So we have to
those things get checked.
Yes. Yeah, we have to give it, and they're not big reports. We don't have to like write a full pen test report, but we do have to say we popped this box, we got user access, or we got root access, or we stole PII. We have to say that we did that and where it happened, and that's how that's how the white team scores stuff. So we have a server that deals with all of that. We also have a couple of things for dealing with shells. We have a couple of things for doing automatic scanning, and that's been hit and miss. Sometimes those scans have been super useful, and sometimes not so much. But they're happening, which is also cover traffic too. So you see a bunch of scans coming across the network. You don't necessarily know what's a scan, what's scorebot, what's actual users, or what's red team. Then in terms of what I'm usually working on is payloads. And we work on payloads all throughout the year. I've got backdoors for several different things that I wrote, just me. I've got several things that I've worked on with Virus. I've got several things that I've worked on with Movix. There's several other things that we have spread out over multiple people. So a lot goes into this. There's a lot in it for sure.
It's not focused in the same areas, but I would argue that like the stuff that goes unreleased from the red team in prep is probably on par with the stuff that like we write that doesn't get public.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily for the same purposes, but like the complexity is about on par.
Well, so what I was kind of wondering, right, like the the classic DEF CON CTF prep story is like everybody tries to lock in on the largest collection of exploits possible, right? That was kind of the old style of doing things. And it seems to me that the focus has switched a little bit away from having like a large collection of novel ODE, because there are kind of more well understood ways of getting access to things. And it's kind of more on like persistence or more focused on the payload, right? So do you still see people trying to lock in, to like massive collections of ways of delivering your payload, or is that usually less of a problem?
It's definitely less of a problem in CCDC. First, because it's a competition network, it's specifically built to be exploited. We don't have to go looking for exploits too often. Then also because it is a competition network, once we get creds, exploits don't matter that much. And that's true in the real world to a great degree as well. So it's realistic in that sense, but it's also like extra, I would say.
I mean, this is where I'd say it's as complex but in a different direction. Like, yes, all those things are true. And in the real world, this is why stealth matters, right? Being quiet is a big deal in the real world because there's never been a more prolific like time for like EDRs and all those things. Not saying that they're amazing, but just that they exist, right? Like there's prying eyes now in the real world. With CCDC, it's not so much about the prying eyes. You're not really worried about being quiet because there's just too fine a comb, right? But you are very worried about being fast. Like, I have never had to have stuff as tested, even on gigs, as I have on CCDC. Like, if it fails, like, after I hit the button and it's supposed to do 50 things and it does 49 of them, I just don't even bother using it again because I don't have time to troubleshoot it. Like, everything has to happen at breakneck speed and it has to work the first time or you're not getting another crack at it.
So on the as the red team, what's your first like half hour like? You start some scanners going.
It's wild. The first 10 minutes are nuts. It's adrenaline pumping. It's like we put on loud music and like everybody just cranks real hard. The first creds that come up get shouted out. If you find some creds, somebody says, "Hey, user Bob with password 123," and everybody uses that password, and now we're into everything. So we typically have some creds in the first 30 seconds of the game. We have access to most everything in the first 10 minutes. By the end of the first 10 minutes, if we don't have persistence, we're probably not going to get it, because the kids are going to start pulling cables. They're going to start shutting down boxes. So at least on some of the easiest boxes to get into, if you don't have persistence, you're not going to get back in that box. So our first 10 minutes is kind of the most important of the game by far. After that, it sort of calms down a bit. And once everybody has sort of settled a bit and we've got our shells and we've started getting our callbacks, our persistence is working, we have our passwords, that's where we start trying to fan out a little bit more. We start looking for privilege escalation if it's necessary. A lot of times it isn't. Usually there will be at least one box that we can't root right away. I'd say every time there's at least one box that we don't get root on right away. Sometimes there's a lot of boxes that we don't get root on right away, and sometimes there's a network that we don't find until the second day.
I was going to say, it's also worth noting that a lot of times that's explicit now, where it's like they get a cloud or something.
Yep.
Like the second day,
Yeah,
And
so the first
like
game,
a whole subnet, you know.
yeah, the first game I played, it was all flat. It was one network, the whole thing. Now the blue team gets a corporate network, they get a cloud network, and then sometimes there's a third network.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Okay, I got to ask
That's
one quick.
amazing.
Yeah, I got to ask one quick clarifying question. So you're calling out a lot of color team names. So the white team is infrastructure. The orange team is for injects. They act like normal users or whatever.
Yep.
So they're like the NPCs.
Yep.
What was the black team?
So the black team is for infrastructure, and the white team are like the referees and the keepers of the
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
and like them. And then there's blue, which is the kids, and then the red team. There's one big red team for
Any other colors? Is that it?
I think that
at the national level, yes, but some of the regions have some weird stuff. Like some of the regions will like separate away the like orange team social engineering from like other orangish things, or they'll
I see.
have like kind of weird
Heart and plaid.
So what are
Yeah.
you doing in the first 10 minutes? Like, how are you usually getting the creds?
It depends on the game, man. Sometimes it's a common exploit that works in a lot of places. Sometimes it's a web server that has the damn password on, like it's just a web page with a big password on it. So sometimes it's sometimes it's super realistic, and sometimes it's like an FTP server with a bunch of passwords.
So when you're doing exploits, like I imagine you have different teams from different regions or colleges. How parallelized are your exploit jobs? So it's like, are there different people responsible for different teams, or is there one person running something gets run in parallel across different instances?
So as the red team, that has sort of shifted around over the years. It has been in the past that everyone is responsible for just their team and nobody else's. It's also been the case that everyone is responsible for making sure that all the teams have exploits for a thing that they found. So it has sort of shifted over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the current guidance from our leadership, thanks Dave, is you are responsible for your team as a red teamer. So my team will be me and Movix and usually some third person with us, and we are responsible for making sure that our team gets all the love that we can deliver. And if we find something, we will share it with the rest of the red team more broadly, but we will not typically exploit everybody else's stuff. And some of that is just so that we don't step on toes, because we've had trouble in the past where somebody runs an exploit and it interferes with somebody else's exploit,
Mm-hmm.
and causes us to lose shells. And nobody likes to lose shells.
Yeah, or like a persistence mechanism that steps over something else, and then they both don't work. It's like
Right.
it gets
So
crazy.
our current guidance is focus on your team, do your team, tell the whole red team about what you find, but don't touch other people's stuff.
Yeah, definitely one thing that's getting more common. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it because it'll give away some stuff we're working on, but like the concept of installers in terms of stagers is much more important.
Right.
It's shifting. Like we used to focus a lot more on like, let's just pack everything into one giant like bomb and then detonate it, every time we do a thing. And that it worked, but it had some trade-offs. And there definitely seems to be a more consistent shift to like, just to get a shell and then hook your shell to something that can install a million other things, like as a second stage, like really effing quick.
Yep.
So,
Which I find is really cool, in part because it mirrors actual attackers. Real bad guys do that. They have one stage first that's fast and works everywhere, and that goes and gets the real shit.
it's kind of the same design pattern as the browser autopwn, except for an operating system.
Right.
Yeah, it has some sensors that sees what's up, and then it goes and pulls the relevant second stage or whatever.
Yeah, the big thing is that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the big thing is that it like Egypt said, we work together all year, but like also we all have like jobs and lives and stuff. So like there's a degree of like severe importance where like everybody comes in day early, a couple days early, and it's how do we sync all this stuff together so that like my second stage installs your third stage, which installs his first stage. It's like, you know, being able to leverage the cannons, you know.
So I always I've never done CCDC myself, but my favorite stories I hear from people about CCDC are like times they made the blue team rage quit. Have you ever
seen and attacked?
Yeah,
I've definitely seen that happen. Yeah.
So do you have any stories like that?
I don't think I've ever made anybody rage quit. I have fought for shells for sure. And I've definitely had let's say disappointing conversations during the debrief. Like I mentioned earlier that I try not to put people in the wrong frame of mind when I'm speaking, and I try not to use the kind of words that piss people off. Sometimes it's not words that piss people off. Sometimes it's shells.
I sent a team home.
You sent a team home once?
I did. It wasn't at Nationals. It was at a regional event. But yeah, we got into a fight over some domain controller stuff, and like the details get murky. But the punchline of the story is there are many domain controllers. There are many like it, but this one is mine. And then some things got turned off, and then literally the team stood up and went home. Checked out of the hotel, went home.
Oh wow.
It's kind of a build up to that, but like, yeah, that's the punchline.
Well, it just seems like it's you know you've got a bunch of professional pen testers who the whole year have to try and be slow and try and be quiet and try and just avoid these kind of dumb IDS systems that have that are robots. They're not like they can't do pattern matching like humans, right? So it's like once you kind of figure out how to work around them, you can just sort of slow down and be very methodical. But it seems like you go to the CCDC and it's like kind of no holds barred. It's you're trying to do everything as fast as possible, kind of scorched earth type stuff. So it's I wonder if how far people push that kind of thing, like when you let everything loose at once.
We definitely put some earth for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know who it was that brought the Nyan Cat booter? I don't remember who that was.
I had an MBR kit for a while that everybody was using. That was the War Games one. You remember that? You remember the War Games one?
No.
Oh yeah. I had a thing that was it was an MBR that you'd boot it and it would do the shall we play a game? ASCII art. That was all it did. So like, it was like a 3, 2, 1. Okay, run this, and anybody who had access to the disk, like even if you were guest, right? Like unless it was locked down, you didn't need access to the file system. You just needed access to the disk. So it would like overwrite the first 512 bytes, set the bit manually on the disk, and then nuke itself, and then the box would just come back and be big. I don't remember who first brought it because I remember there was like Script Junkie had one, and then I remember you guys had one. That was the same year where you guys like recorded audio and video from your team, and like Dave put it in the. Great. You got to tell him that story.
That one wasn't the. So there have been numerous episodes of audio recording of teams. Script Junkie is most famous for those. He has a lot of.
Yeah.
Like
when he gets video, he gets audio and video, or it's like
he gets the webcam too. Oh man. I think one of my favorite Script Junkie antics was he opened up the webcam and was recording audio, and then from another box he played Thunderstruck at full volume. It was
And like recorded a
hilarious.
reaction video like, without their knowledge.
Just freaked out. They just freaked out. Like everybody just stops. Like they pause. Like they're deer in the headlights.
and he has the video of them freaking out from Thunderstruck coming from the other box. That's amazing. So what was the Nyan Cat booter? Was that another MBR thing?
Yeah, it was an MBR that just replaced the bootloader with Nyan Cat. You reboot it and the computer becomes Nyan Cat.
See, that's that.
It's a new
Bit style where it was like the
Yep.
through space, and then it would have the it like over and over again.
with the PC speaker. Yeah.
With the PC speaker.
Oh man, so because it just seems like this is all stuff you would never do at a real engagement, right? You wouldn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna like, well, what the fuck, pwn people.
Yeah, there was there was a time where like I remember like me and Javier got yelled at. Like
yeah.
There have been various forms of people getting yelled at, and like rules had to be made because like the slash Bism got a little bit high. like me and Javier one year were like using like one year it was like ICE. Remember when ICE was like seizing stuff, like seizing websites, and like so like somebody had a screenshot. And like we had like reverse engineered it and had like an HTML paste of what that ICE looked like. So we were like defacing kids' websites with like ICE has seized like a Pepe year where there was like animated Pepe shells and stuff like that. And it got like way out of hand. And then like
I did a Stallone one with Sylvester Stallone, like with the bicep and the Hawaiian T-shirt, and it's Stallone.
Yeah,
I replaced all of their websites with that.
Yeah, each of the movies together are the spawner of a rule, which is you're not allowed to write or introduce viral payloads anymore because one escaped.
Oh man, I still hope that someday that rule changes.
You and me both, because it's the reason I can't use RatNet. Because you're not allowed to attack a team from another team, and like I used RatNet one year, and like I couldn't be descriptive about how packets were leaking because I didn't know, and they were like, "You can't do that."
Oh, so you can't use like anything that worms or anything anymore?
We have no.
Yeah. You can't use anything.
It can't. No worms, and you cannot attack a team from another team.
Oh. Well,
if we get completely locked out of a team, but another team could talk to them, we can't touch it.
That's actually totally unrealistic, right? Because one thing attackers do is like supply chain attacks, obviously, like SolarWinds being the most recent example.
It was an issue in the beginning because the way that the network was laid out in those games, it became a problem because it was easy to tell from a blue team perspective, like, oh, that's clearly red team traffic. And so it was just how fast can we block it versus like black team subnets. I would argue that in the past few years, that problem is pretty much solved because of the way that the networking is laid out now and with the way that information disclosure works. Like, until we do something that looks like red team, like you really can't tell whether or not a connection is coming from red team or black team. Like they've done a good job of making that like not a gameable thing. So
the anti-worm rule came in because something escaped? Because
they were worried that something might.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but the something was his thing.
I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
And then we did have there was one year where something did escape. Where like we did, like it wasn't supposed to be wormable. It was
that was where one of the students was using a personal laptop.
Oh, they got exploited.
And yeah, they ran some shit on a personal laptop. And
it was a thumb drive. It was the kids got given an inject where they had to digest information that was given to them on a thumb drive. So every team got a thumb drive.
Yeah.
And
we dropped some shit on their thumb drive.
They had an implant that would look for, among other things, like drives that would pop up so that it could backdoor files. And it just
manual.
happened to be
manual. We didn't. That wasn't worm. Like that was an automated thing. That was manual.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so they infected a file that was on a thumb drive, and then the thumb drive got taken out and put in a personal machine at some point for like some verifiable like scoring reason, and it like infected the machine.
That is actually, that's a totally realistic attack vector. Also, is I mean, I've seen malware go through hard drives looking for JavaScript files or like HTML files, and automatically adding JavaScript that then pulls down a browser exploit to it that then delivers the original attack, right? And so that's a really old trick.
I mean, part of why everybody at Nationals knows about Backdoor Factory is because, like, that was a thing I did one year where I, like, handed out a Metasploit RC script that would just go through every single binary on the file system and run Backdoor Factory against it. Replace the file.
Yeah, totally. So, so when they have injects where they give the blue team USB sticks and the red team can mess with those?
Not directly. If they plug them into a game system, then
oh,
okay.
The so they're not like giving you guys the USB sticks first, and then okay.
That has happened at regionals before. It happened once, I think, at nationals before, where it was like, okay, you have 10 minutes to do whatever you're going to do to your team's USB stick, but the injects are random. Like we don't know. You can't plan for it. Like
that's pretty cool. It's like NPC quests.
Yeah.
Super cool. And with that, I think we're going to take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be back after these brief messages. Hey, this is Ben from Symbol Crash. While we're on break, I wanted to share some updates. We have a new YouTube channel at youtube.com/symbolcrash, spelled SYMBOL Crash. We have all our episodes up there with an awesomely hypnotic video loop made by our very own Virus. We don't do ads because as working security professionals, we don't need your money. But we do ask that you like and subscribe, or if you're like me, you're too paranoid and annoyed by advertising to browse while logged into anything, maybe tell a friend about us and have them do it. You can also have your friend follow SymbolCrash1 on Twitter, or check out our site at symbolcrash.com for the links we post for each episode and the occasional blog post or online event we run, including the monthly hardware hacking workshop. We're also doing a survey. What is the biggest what the fuck you've seen on an engagement? Either the funniest or scariest thing you've seen so far. Leave us an audio email, tell us your story, at podcast@symbolcrash.com, or call the hacker helpline and leave a message at 206-486-6272. When we get enough of these stories together, we'll do a What the Fuck episode, and we'll share some of our stories, and it'll be a good time. And now, back to our regularly programmed schedule. And we're back with Egypt. So, I hear you have some interesting things to do with shells. Yes. So, if I have a shell, what should I do with it?
Oh, there's all kinds of things. So I started working on some weird shell shit in Metasploit back in the day, in part to get the different kinds of payloads for weird scenarios. You know, like if you're on, if you're exploiting a vulnerability in a service that runs on something that doesn't have a reasonable version of Bash, or something that has Perl but nothing else, or so we needed a whole bunch of different kinds of ways of getting a remote shell. So I did some effort on making reverse shells for a lot of the different ways that might be possible in unknown scenarios on some kind of unit. So Metasploit has shells for all kinds of shit for that very reason. From that research, I found out that GNU awk has a whole fucking TCP stack.
What? I didn't realize I had a TCP stack.
Yeah, so you can do anything in awk that you would do with like fucking Netcat.
Wow.
I've
So-
seen you fit awk reverse shells in a tweet before.
Yes. Yeah, good time. So there's things like Bash's built-in dev TCP, where it's a fake device. There's no actual file called dev TCP, but in a Bash shell specifically, it's a hard-coded path that means create a TCP socket. And awk has a whole API for dealing with TCP. And there's Perl, and there's Ruby, and someone else came along later and wrote basically the same idea in Node.js. There's a handful of others for weird esoteric situations. I also wrote a bunch of the stuff for dealing with a shell from a post-exploitation perspective when you're trying to do things like binary file transfer.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so you can reliably do binary file transfer in a lot of different ways. Things like echo-ne, which is the N is for no new line and E to do escapes. That's a Bashism. Nothing else has that.
That's only Bash? I thought that was the Echo command itself.
No, that's awesome. Bash-ne only works on Bash. It's the Bash built-in Echo. Bin Echo, depending on what system you're on, either has -n or -e, but never both, as far as I can tell.
And BusyBox Echo is useless for that.
Right, yeah. BusyBox Echo doesn't have either. If you do Echo-ne, you'll get a literal -ne to stand it up.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really liked doing a while ago was when you get like a ch rooted or at this point containered system that has like only very few command line tools, like replacing like ls with tar-xf. Or is there anything like that you?
Oh sure, yeah. So that was a fun thing. I found myself on an AWS file gateway device.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it before. I don't know what the hell it was, but I had creds. I SSH'd into it, and it puts you into this like menu system. But it turns out that that's actually just rbash, which is restricted bash. And you can only run commands in certain directories. You can't modify the environment, and it's got some other restrictions that prevent you from being able to break out of it. But you can still read files from the file system, even if you don't have cat. You can still list files without ls. So in that specific instance, echo star will give you a list of files, because echo is a shell built in, and star means all the files. So you can ls without ls. You can cat with the read command, the read built in. So you can do while read on a file, and it'll pull in every byte of that file and print it to standard out, but there's no new process being created. So there's all kinds of cool shit you can do like that with Bash built-ins to achieve the same goals of a binary on disk without having to invoke that binary on disk.
I want to go back to binary file transfer, because this is a problem I have targeting IoT embedded all the damn time.
Yeah.
So you can pop a shell on embedded, like, so the threat model is a little bit different. Like I usually have physical access to a device, and I can connect physically to the serial port and escape out of U-boot or something, and then I have a shell, right? But interacting with the device through this shell is insanely painful. And if somebody like trips over the wrong wire in the room, it's like you lose your shell, and it's just slow typing into it. So typically what I want to do is dump the whole file system out and then take it away on my beefy Linux box, where I can disassemble things and fuck around in IDA or whatever, right? So in the past, if Python is on there, you can just do like, write a little Python script, like hexlify all the files, copy them out the serial port, like rebuild it on the other end. If UU encoding is present, I can encode everything to MIME. I can just do like some shell script recursive descent, encode everything to MIME, unencoded on the other end, fairly reliably. But if hex dump is there, you can dump stuff to hacks, and then try and rebuild it on the other side. But I've gotten into some like weird, systems where like none of this stuff is there. I end up doing some kind of like weird, and it's always busybox on embedded. It's like you never have full bash.
Yep.
Right. And so, I've ended up doing some like truly weird crap, trying to basically, recursive descent through the file system, or like tar up as much of it as I can, and then, try and transfer the tar file. Cause sometimes, there's not a lot of RAM, present. I got it in my head, like maybe it would be possible to write like X modem. So back in the old days, you used to have like SZ and RZ to send and receive with Z modem that would work entirely over the shell. But that's like requiring your terminal program to have some support for Z modem. But a lot of terminal programs still do, strangely enough. So I got it in my head like maybe you could write like something that uses X modem, Y modem, Z modem just to send. But it would have to run in like straight corn shell, and like you can't count on bash being present or anything. But then the idea is like once you get one of these shells open, you could just paste it into a text buffer, save it, and then like run it to dump the whole file system. Now I never ended up doing that, mainly because I started reading the Z modem spec. And then I suddenly remembered all this other shit I had to do, and now it's like it's 14 years later or something. But I'm wondering if you have any ideas for like this situation.
If you have printf, you can do hex escapes. So that'll let you get files onto the file system. And that's actually a little bit tricky in terms of portability, because sometimes printf does hex escapes and sometimes it doesn't. From what I can tell, it always does octal escapes. So you can always escape it to something. Usually octal escapes work. I don't think I've found a printf that doesn't support octal escapes.
Sometimes,
and if you're trying to read file, that is, I think, a little bit more difficult. I found curl a lot on embedded devices. If you have curl, then you're golden.
Yeah, of course.
If you have OpenSSL, then it can do base 64 encoding. If you have UU encode is sometimes available.
If it's the 90s.
Does it awkward with
I mean, I've seen it on routers though.
I've seen awk a lot of places.
Yeah.
Is awk binary capable?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, awk will be binary. I haven't done extensive like portability tests with like checking with awk. I know that there are several different implementations of awk. GNU awk is the only one I'm aware of that has a TCP stack.
Oh yeah. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
So sometimes
you should be able to do all the things that you would be able to do with Perl.
Some of these devices, even if I can write a binary file to it, the architecture, like I'm specifically thinking about this, there was one femtocell thing I got on, where their whole Linux implementation was actually, it was like FPGA Linux.
What?
Oh, the
yeah, which is actually there's a few different variants of this where it's like, it's like Linux, which is running on an FPGA, and I have no idea really how to make that binary format. Like, I don't have the right tool chain. I don't even necessarily, I don't know
the instruction set.
Yeah, I don't know the instruction set. It's like completely bizarre.
So it's not like a RISC-V softcore or something.
Well, it was. I think it's like MIP. It's like pretending to be MIPS 64 or something.
Xilinx has the microblaze is what they use.
Yeah,
And
the one I landed on was I think an Altera product,
yeah,
which is
Altera
a
uses
competitor to
something
Xilinx. Yeah, and I
not
forget. I forget.
not as well supported at all. Like yeah, they
I,
have
fe-
some weird core.
I forget the actual brand name. But that's sort of what led me to think like, hey, if I could do this with just like a minimal set of shell commands, that would be ideal. And I ended up hacking up something super ugly. But that's been on my lifetime wish list for a long time. Yeah, I definitely would get it more into Awk. That's definitely something to check out.
I think one of the coolest shell collection wickedness I've ever seen is you gave like I think it was like a Black Hat talk or a DEF CON talk a while ago. Or I remember there was a slide in there where it was only like brace extensions and like function substitution. Like there were no words in it. Like it was one of those. It looked like one of those like JavaScript. Like this is XSS, I swear, and there's no letters. Yeah.
So that's actually one. The curly braces in Bash are really interesting. So actually, there's a tool that IOActive wrote, which is the JDWP shellifier, and the JDWP shellifier, under the hood, it basically lets you inject a shell command into the Java debug wire protocol. But it has a bug in that they only partially implemented the call to exec in Java. And so the way exec works in Java is the first argument is meant to be just the name of the command. And all of the arguments after that are like the arguments, to the command. And as a result, the way it calls into the system, it doesn't do proper shell expansion on the first command. But the JDWP shellifier takes whatever shell command you're trying to run, and it just crams it into that first argument of Java exec. So as a result, you often get bugs with it if you put something in there with spaces.
Yes.
And so
that has been a long running with Java. That has come up with deserialization exploits, with all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Basically anywhere where you're dealing that exact thing is a pain in the ass.
There's a solution for it, which is really interesting. You can replace all of the spaces with open curly braces and terminate you can do open close curly braces.
Curly brace, comma, curly brace.
Yeah. And you can do that anywhere where you need a space but can't use a space.
Yep.
And that one's brilliant. But there's a lot.
There's another solution to that exact problem that uses argument expansion. So you do basically like sh pipe sh echo $, and it looks weird as fuck, but the way it works out is that echo $* becomes the whole list of arguments of the command that you're going to run, and that gets run as an sh command, and then that echoes the thing that you actually want to run, and that gets run by sh. Well, it looks weird because your command is actually at the end of the line. It's sh pipe sh echo $, and then your actual command that you're running. So it looks weird, but your process tree ends up being like sh your shit.
I haven't messed with it for offensive purposes for the most part, but like doing blue teamy stuff on OS X with OS Query, it's definitely interesting to see how like whole Apple frameworks break down into like command lines. And what's interesting is that when OS X Bash runs the command line, instead of a process linked to a process linked to a process linked to a process, that doesn't happen. What happens is if you have like a thing, pipe, thing, pipe, thing, pipe, thing, Bash actually runs all of those processes at the same time. They actually have the same timestamp, even in the OpenBSM log. And then they're basically all kind of in pseudo suspended mode by the kernel, and then XPC goes back and glues all the inputs and outputs together for stuff to run, and then it runs them all at the same time, which is interesting because you'll see trees where it's like, launch D like something, and login L and then bash, and then it'll just be like 20 different processes. But when you go look at the command line for the bash thing, it's like, oh, this is all one command, and it's just this one command needed these like 50 other processes to do little parts of it, and they were all glued together.
Yeah, that has the advantage from a systems programmer perspective that the processes can just wait for I/O. So nothing is blocking unless it's waiting for the previous command in the pipeline.
Are there any good resources where there's like lists of these sorts of tricks? Kind of like, I'm sure you've seen like lolbass or GTFO bins.
I did a presentation with my homie William Vu at DEF CON 2 years ago. Man, pandemic years kind of blur together, but 2 years ago I did a presentation with William Vu about Bash one-liners, called the one-liners to rule them all. And we talked about a lot of these sorts of things that you can do with Bash shells, or SH shells generally. There's also Explain Shell. I think it's explainshell.com. But there's a tool for pasting a command line into, and that will give you a breakdown with quotes from the man page about what does this little piece of the command do, and it breaks it down into a tree. So it parses the whole command for you and shows you a tree of what each little piece of the command is doing. It's super cool. Useful especially for walking through shell scripts. Super awesome.
Like that sounds amazing.
Reminds me of that debugX tool if you're writing regex.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I didn't know that was a thing. That makes sense. I remember seeing the slides in that talk and seeing one of those like colon open curly brace close curly brace things, and it's just like, what is that?
Oh, I've used Bash for decades probably, and there's like types of redirects that I've seen, not just like redirecting standard error to standard out or whatever the regular thing, but the backwards redirects.
Oh yeah, all those crazy like 3 and 2 /.
There was one project I actually published a long time ago where I spent like 3 days reading through the manual page to figure out how to do this weird backwards redirect thing I wanted to do. And literally 2 weeks later, I looked at the code and had no idea how it worked. And to this day, I still don't understand how it works. It was like there was one gleaming moment in the sun where I had my head around it, and then it was just gone. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny. There's like a CCDC thing where like people sometimes credit me as being the person who figured out how to do the space as a file name to like store your implant thing. So like you have cron jobs that call the backslash nothing and they work, but that's actually Egypt. He was the one who taught me how to do that.
I've been seeing that going back to like 2000.
Yeah, well, it gets worse when you do like hidden files. So it's like
dot
space is a file instead of previous, because on the terminal it looks like nothing, and then you put that in like a cron job or like a R login script. You're just like, what? It either looks totally normal, like that kind of gibberish, or you're just like, I have no idea what's going on here.
That's brutal. So what if you did an LS? You'd see 2 dots, right? You'd see dot, and then dot.
No, you see dot, dot, and then you see dot again.
Yeah.
So like,
if it's dot space,
real close, you'll notice, but otherwise it'll just look like, dot slash. Yeah, of course there's a dot slash.
People like my terminal's glitching.
When I was like, I think it was 2006 or something like that, I was working at a web hosting company, and it was a VPS web hosting company. So like all of these like people who had no business having root web hosts were running them because it was cheap, and that's just what it was in that time. So these websites were all basically king of the hill for like hackers, because like nobody was updating their websites and things like that. And like every once in a while, like we get these load spikes, and so you go into like some like a user report or something like that, like, hey, you gotta shut your shit off. But we take a look at the process tree because it was OpenVZ at the time, basically early containers. And it would just be like, you just see these like all sorts of exploits that have these like like different teams, like, or different hacking groups would have like owning the same box, like dot dot, and it's like, no, this other team uses dot dot space. This one uses like question mark, which is hard to delete, or like asterisk, which is we'll just remove all the files.
Or a file called -rf space /
Yeah, exactly. But it was just like this complete clusterfuck. Those are good times.
Good times indeed. Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories about finding other hackers was a university where somebody got into an old Solaris box and spent who knows how long there, and they sat there for a while, and then the system administrators, the legit people who ran the box, started getting emails about disk full, and it turned out that the box was so old that none of his tools worked on it, so he was upgrading the operating system so that his rootkit would work, and it filled up the disk.
Oh man, I was expecting like an FTP server or something, like, oh, FTP where's, right? That would be that's the normal old story.
I feel like we've done that in the CCDC at least once, where it's like, oh, I needed this version of this thing. Hang on, does it have apt? Yeah, it does. Okay, apt gets.
With those old Solaris boxes, you don't want to touch them. Like if it like,
Oh,
we got a company that had a uptime on a Solaris box of like 9 years or something like that. Somebody like rebooted it.
Yeah, there was probably a really good reason no one had updated that box.
Yeah, the disc wasn't spinning anymore. Once it stopped, it just would not start back up. Like the disc literally started making like.
Once it lost its inertia, it no longer had the strength to keep going.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Oh man. Well, I mean, I guess moving to modern times. So you're actually working as a red teamer right now.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask, I guess, how the game has changed, or sort of what does the problem look like at the moment?
Well, I mean, I still see a lot of MS-17010, which is, of course, a 2.5-year-old bug now. I think that's probably one of the things that we're going to see for a while. I think the actual exploit that I probably use most commonly right now is various Java deserialization bugs. The WebLogic WSAT bug is probably the one that I see most commonly. That's the one that gets me shells a lot. I've seen everything from Windows 2000s to complete Mac shops, and just in the last 3 years.
Wow. Yeah, I mentioned JDWP. That's basically like if people are doing Eclipse remote debugging and they leave the port open. That's a free shell injection.
Java RMI too.
Yeah. I was gonna go. I was going right there. Java RMI. A lot of JMX. Yes. So JMX is turned on by default with a lot of the Apache Foundation projects.
Yep.
And it by default it does not have a password set.
Yep.
So that's like, oh hell yeah. Speaking of Tomcat, there's also a Tomcat bug that you find a lot of places too, because a lot of things are just embedded Tomcat. So a lot of people are running Tomcat and it's not updated, and they don't even know they're running Tomcat because it got installed by it's used under the hood by something else they're running or some appliance they're running.
I don't know if I've ever seen a Tomcat server in the wild ever that had a password other than either password or admin.
Or manager or Tomcat.
Our manager, right? Like, I don't.
Oh, there's another one. There's a weird one that comes from some specific vendor. I don't remember exactly what, but it's like QSBC something 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 is the username and the password. but some vendor uses it, and it's really common. It's in the default word list for Metasploit.
Nice.
Nice. I guess the other super common one is like Java certs that don't matter because like Java did the whole Java 3 thing. None of our old certs matter, but like also all their IPMI shit was still running like Java 2. So people just got used to like certs aren't real anymore. Like,
oh God, the one that drives me crazy. So I love man in the middling. That's like one of my favorite things for some reason. And what drives me crazy is a lot of places are running SSH behind a load balancer.
What?
Yeah. So SSH doesn't have. There's no support in SSH for like CA signed certs. So basically, everything has to be kind of point to point.
No, there is, but I've never seen anyone do it.
I've never seen anyone. No, everyone says that. They're all like, "Oh, isn't there support for it?" There is a patch. There is a patch somewhere that someone came up with that can let SSH work that way, but it's not in most default installations for starters, and nobody's using it anyway.
Well, you can have client certs. I don't know about the server.
That's what
you can have client certs, yes. But there is no capacity to have the server side trust a cert based only on a CA signature. Or vice versa. There's no way to have the client trust the server based on a CA signature. That's what it is. So as a result,
the former is true. The server, there is a way to make the server trust a client.
But that's actually that is true, but it's not useful because when you're running SSH behind a load balancer, basically my SSH client goes out to the load balancer. I get sent to one of a variety of backend servers, and those backend, each with a different host key. And so what happens? You get the pop up like, do you want to override? Like you're being man in the middle, maybe. Like, do you want to override it? And every company that's running SSH behind a load balancer, all of their a lot of them will tell their employees just ignore that. Just power through, and all of the employees are being trained now to ignore that you are being man in the middle message for SSH.
I've seen SSH provision scripts that add strict host key checking deliberately set to off in their scripts that they have to all of their automation.
And that's the new hotness. So as not to scare your users, you just disable the check entirely so they don't get the scary message.
There is a way to actually fix that, but finish your thing.
Yeah, everybody says that, but nobody does it. So the beautiful thing about this, there's a Go program called SSH proxy, which you can actually just use to man in the middle people's SSH connections, and it actually works now, and it never worked in the past, right? This is like a new thing because of like expanding stupid from the cloud era, right?
That's amazing.
And I just
ephemeral
love that.
Servers and like just like auto what's it called, like auto scaling like servers, they start up and nobody has the host keys. So the way to fix that is you have to actually make sure to like securely send out your host key when you're doing the auto scaling or whatever, when you provision it, and like have it actually signed by CA or like go to whatever server. But there's a client there's a script that you can run in your SSH client configuration, which upon connecting to a new host, it'll run that script, and or if it gets an invalid key, and then it'll determine whether or not it's valid. It'll basically pull down.
Oh, doing it from a script in the client configuration is actually reasonable. I haven't heard that before. That's a good idea. Yeah. So what I have seen is somebody, some random dude on the internet patched SSH and was like, "Here, just take my patch. This will solve your security problem." And I was like, "Uh-huh. Yeah, that seems like a good idea."
I've seen PAM auth that do it, where you just defer to PAM, and then there are PAM modules that will just say,
that would be kind of similar to doing it with a script. You could also do it through PAM.
Yeah, the difference with PAM is you get logging, and you can also enable pinning, right? And then you also have pinning. I've only seen this done once because it was good. Every other time I've seen it, it's either a backdoor or crap. Where they actually used Diffie-Hellman so that it would have the standard like PAM module that would do the auth for the cert, and then you'd log in, and then the PAM thing would have a secondary PAM module. You know how you can like post auth PAM modules? I've seen it before where somebody, I can't remember what it's called, but it's public. I'll go find it. It was a post off PAM module that would generate a second key, and then it would auth with that key, and it would use that key for all the logging. So you actually had like a certified encrypted log of everything that like the first shell did, because it was like there's the key for all the things. Cool.
So do you ever do like social engineering, or are you like strictly technical?
The social engineering I do is mainly phishing, which is kind of on that edge of technical and social engineering. And I don't do it all that frequently, so I kind of suck at it. But
yeah,
that's how
I'm the same way. I don't ever want to deal with the people. I just want to go straight to the machines.
Yeah.
My thing is stuck on the phone. When I was pen testing, I used to hate phone stuff. I just something about it. I get crazy. Absolutely. I get crazy anxiety. I can't phone. Like email all day long, but like I can't do phone.
Yeah, every year that passes, like fewer people are even answering phones. So it's fortunately, I think that's going away, which is nice. What about what about sort of like IDS systems or like EDRs, or do you worry about those too much?
I'm seeing a lot more EDRs. I'm seeing Silence and Carbon Black on most customers now. One or the other.
What? Oh, I was going to ask which variant of Carbon Black. So Carbon Black can have it can mean a bunch of different setups ultimately.
Yeah, I haven't paid too close attention to like which ones I'm seeing. All I know is Carbon Black shows up in the, if I see cb.exe, then I know I've got to pay more attention to my payloads. And that's like most engagements now. We do kind of a variety of different test types. So I'll do an internal, starting with a VM on the inside that I have, they provision for me. I run a scan, I look at the scan results, and then that's sort of a breadth first search kind of attack, looking for all the bugs rather than trying to get to something particular. And then we do another thing for assumed breach, where they give me some access to a desktop image. And sometimes those are pretty real. Sometimes they ship me a damn laptop. And they can be tough. They can, for sure. Like if I've got a laptop and all I have is a low privilege login to it, sometimes I don't get off that laptop. Like that has happened. I've also had assumed breach sort of gigs where they give me like a Citrix Connect or like a VMware VDI, those sorts of things. And it seems like, and I don't have a ton of data. I probably don't have enough to call this science, but my feeling is that if the standard way that users get into the is through one of those things like Citrix or a VDI, I'm more successful in stealing all the shit. If I have a laptop shipped to my house, it seems like I'm less successful with that.
Is that because on the laptop they're making use of the TPM or hardware features or something else?
So I think that's part of it. I've not gotten a laptop that wasn't that full disk encrypted wasn't FDE. I've not gotten a laptop where I was able to do anything super funky to it on the network. Like they typically force a VPN, don't allow split tunnels, and I don't know if that's just my customers do it that way, and the particular customers' laptops that I ended up with are that way, or if that's becoming more standard in the industry. I don't know. All I know is that when I see a customer that wants to ship me a laptop, I know I'm in for a road. And I've played with a whole bunch of different kind of payloads in all those scenarios, and I've had the most luck with custom stuff, sort of obviously. Some of the like off the shelf things that I've had good luck with lately. Sliver has been really successful.
Oh yeah, developed by friends of the podcast.
Yeah, yeah, I like Sliver. I wish it had a socks proxy, but the setup for Sliver is nice and it's relatively painless. I hate waiting for my payloads to build, but they work when they land. So I'm willing to wait the 15 minutes for underpowered VM to build the binary for me if it means that I get a shell at the end of it. I've had decent success with custom shellcode loaders, but shellcode in general seems to be a lot harder to land these days than it used to be. Then on the other hand, I've also had engagements where okay, so as an example, in 2019 I had a customer in the manufacturing industry who had something like 5,000 live hosts on their internal network. Of those, about half of them were Windows. Of those, about half of them were 2008 or older. So there were like 2,500 Windows 2008 servers. There were a couple hundred XP boxes. There was a couple dozen 2003 servers.
Wow.
They had
like a museum.
It was a nightmare because I found everything in there.
It's too much to write up at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, more than that. I had evidence of compromise on the first day, and then like you're running fucking Bitcoin miners on your domain controller. What can I do? You know.
Man.
So I've had both of those sorts of scenarios. I also had one where the laptops were not so from VPN, laptops were not allowed to talk to any other laptops and were only allowed to talk to a subset of servers. So you get a VPN connection and you can't do shit. Like you can talk to the website and the internet, what you do. So there's a lot of stuff in both directions, really.
Are Macs getting more popular yet from like a enterprises big enough to hire pen testers perspective, or is it still like startups and like random?
In the 3 years that I've been doing pen testing full time, I've had one shop that was all Mac. I've had a handful that were Windows and Mac. I think probably a lot of them had a handful. I've had a handful that were lots of Macs, and I've had one that was all Mac.
And then the lots of Macs situation, like you just go for the Windows boxes because they're easier. Or?
Typically, yeah. And from my perspective, the Windows boxes are easier because they're all centrally managed. You get into them through AD. Sometimes in the lots of Macs scenario, they're also managed by AD. And then getting into AD gets you logins through SSH, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, Macs are usually like hard, crunchy shell, right? Like soft chewy middle.
Yeah.
Gatekeeper.
Yeah,
is
like
well named.
Yeah, getting a shell on Mac is tough, and then once you've got a shell on Mac, then
then like you're good. All the things.
Well, you're past the gate, right?
Yeah.
So they had the gatekeeper, and then you go past the gate, and then it's all good.
Some joke about Gozer the Gozerian.
Yeah, there is no Dana, only Zool.
Yeah.
That doesn't
on the
work.
other hand, though, I've never needed to get on a Mac. On the other hand, like I've gotten on a few Macs and looked around and said, "There's nothing here." I have definitely never needed to get on a Mac. The important shit is either on a Windows server or a Linux server.
That's true. There aren't any there aren't any like Mac domain controllers or
Right.
I mean, there probably is one somewhere just to be difficult, but
Yeah,
you
probably.
don't, yeah.
But I've
Well,
never
I'm
seen like
Yeah.
The production database running on a PowerBook, right?
I was more just taking the temperature because like so much of the enterprise for so many years now has been moving to like microservices, which is just another way of saying third party website.
Right.
So it's like, I'd like someday it's going to be, there isn't a production database. It's just Dropbox or something, right? Or some equivalent. And so I'm like, well, you're still doing this. Is that a thing yet? No. Okay, cool. I got some more time.
You ever mess with CICDs? Is that a loaded question?
Occasionally. I got into a pretty big Ansible infrastructure recently, which they had GitHub Enterprise with a bunch of creds in it with no authentication required on the inside. And that got me into all the Ansible stuff. And that was a lot of stuff. So yeah, I see that too, for sure.
So it was
Jenkins is always the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Yeah, Jenkins, Travis.
Yep.
But so with GitHub Enterprise, what did you add up a malicious pipeline, and then the pipeline had the creds, or
no? They just had all their repos were public.
Oh,
that's a very different problem than what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. I'm also hearing like if you have a regular account and you can add a repo, even if you can't see other repos, you can add like CI/CD pipelines, and when the CI/CD pipelines run, they are like granted creds to run in some network segment, and sometimes you can do fun things from there. Or the other one I'm hearing is adding webhooks. So a lot of times you can get access to something as a user, but you can add webhooks, and the webhooks can call out to places you can't get to directly. I was going to ask about sort of pivoting also. Do you do any like so one type of pivot I don't understand as much as I'd like to is like Kerberos. Do you do any like Kerber roasting or whatever that is?
I do Kerber roasting on every engagement as soon as I get an AD credit. Every single time.
Can you explain Kerber roasting to me as if I am stupid?
Is it like
because I can give that's a high level of it.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So the basic idea is you can request a special Kerberos ticket for service principal accounts. And that contains a hash of the NTLM hash. You can crack that down to the NTLM. You can also, from what I understand, go straight to the password. It's a slow ass hash. So it's going to take some cycles. But the big thing about it is you get offline crack with all you need is an AD credit.
So how do you get how much kind of privilege do you need to start this?
Any
like
AD
what's
credit.
Any AD credit at all?
Just LDAP bind, right?
All you need to do is be able to bind LDAP.
Wow. So it's like the ticket, but not.
So what's the so any AD credit at all, you can request a service account Kerberos ticket and then crack it.
Yes. Yeah. And if you crack it, you can, you basically get the password for that account. It's a slow ass hash, like I said. So on a cracking rig, it can do 100 million NTLM cracks a second. Is going to do like, 1 million or less on Kerberos. So it's a lot slower than some other offline cracks, but it's not PBKDF either.
So what do you use to do your offline cracking? Like LCOM, or you got some
Hashcat
Hashcat box full of GPUs? Yep,
Hashcat on a box full of GPUs.
Does it usually take a box full, or is it like, can you do it on 1 or 5?
I mean, it depends on
it's always list, faster, right?
Depends on the word list.
Yeah.
Really.
So I've seen Kerberoastable accounts that were like domain admin level privileges with 8-character passwords.
Ooh.
That were set in 2015 or whatever.
Wow.
So
amazing.
sometimes it's an offline crack that gets you to domain admin right away.
Is it a manual process, or is it like is this like I ran crackmac exec and it told me that I could Kerberos this and then I put it into Hashcat and it's done, or like is this like you have to kind of fuck with it?
There's a couple of different kind of tools to do it. There's a PowerShell thing called invoke Kerberoast. Mimikatz can do it. There's a C# version of it, SharpRoast. That's from the Ghost Pack crew. Yeah, I've used Inpacket as well. You can do it with Inpacket. So there's several different tools that you can use to do it, and they all depend on what system you have available. So if you're on a Windows box, obviously you're gonna prefer either the PowerShell or the C# version. If you have a Linux VM somewhere, you can use Inpacket, but they all come back with the same sort of output that you can plug right into Hashcat and just go to town.
So do you have like your own word lists, or are you are you using the ones from Gosney or
I don't use his specifically. I've sort of cobbled together some of my own in addition to the ones that my colleagues use. So we've got various things cobbled together, both from like public sources and also our own internal cracking. We sort of feed our pots together as the years go by.
The big thing with Hashcat too, right, is not just the word list; it's the mutation engine for the
Right.
word list.
Yeah.
Like that's the hardest part, I think, to get off the ground.
Like you can do some really powerful stuff with the rules there, and the hardest part for me is keeping it to a reasonable number of iterations, because it's super easy to just go ham on it and end up with, oh well, now I'm going to be trying passwords till the end of the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And if your admins are keeping track of their service principals and putting unique enough passwords on those accounts, then you never would have had success anyway.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting to me that the kind of art of maintaining a good word list never really went away.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, decades ago, it was just about like guessing people's passwords straight up in the login prompt. I mean, maybe it still is in some cases, but now it's just sort of morphed to this like, we have this like big hash cracking box, but yet we still need a human curated word list.
Well, there was recently like a super big breach of like, it was like the have you been pwned of have you been pwns. Did you guys see this?
Nice.
It was like a have you been pwned type site that had like supposedly way more stuff than even have you been pwned. It was just like a collection, whatever, and it was like a private, like corporate. You could search creds against it, kind of thing. It may have even been like like associated with them. It got breached relatively recently, and then like the whole database got dumped.
That's amazing. So one of my favorite things, it was a DEF CON talk I think I saw a while ago. That was about just building word lists using like foreign dictionaries, because like one of the things is like, if you're too like American centric, then you're going to have these word lists that are obviously English centric. When you like if you think about it from the perspective of somebody who speaks another language by default, or like natively, that's what it's called. Then like when they'll get trained by like a dictionary word like password managers. It's like, oh, your password is weak. Well, it's not actually a dictionary word, but it is a dictionary word in their language. It's not in English, but it is in their language.
The trouble is, I don't know what words are common in languages I don't speak.
Well,
so it's like
that's
But
pretty easy to
Wikipedia
find. That's
is
pretty easy to
there.
find out.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that if you have access to LDAP, then you know where all of your users are. And if you have if you're targeting a global company, maybe it's not easy. It's like you could probably find some people in America, but also you could probably find a ton more in like India, or this one that I did was had a big office in Turkey, and that was like, oh wow, I got like 25% of the users.
Yeah, so one of the things I do there is I use a tool called Cool, CEWL,
Okay.
which is I think it's the custom enumerator for word lists. It goes to, so you give it a URL, it'll go scrape a website and pull out all the unique words from that website.
Awesome.
wow. Then you just add the year and an exclamation point, and you're in business.
That's
Exactly.
actually really awesome for a corporate engagement, because it's like people are going to be filled with this corporate propaganda all around them, and if they're trying to think of something, like it's going to come up with whatever corporate that's going to pop up in front of their brain.
Yeah, exactly. And at the very least, that will add the company name to your word list, which is always going to be in there somewhere.
Yep. Well, and like acronyms or like business unit names. Yeah,
Yep.
that totally makes sense.
I was going to ask, because there's like a bunch of programs that I've seen. Well, not a bunch. I've seen a handful of programs that I haven't seen get old, so I assume they're still being maintained over the years. That like you give it like a domain name, and it'll basically web scrape, and then it'll take like words from the scraped websites and then put those together, and then run some like basic rule engine and heuristics on it, and then like you feed that into your mutator, and then
he just mentioned that.
Oh.
When you are dealing with the foreign languages, though, the one thing I want to point out is that you want to look up what the traditional like romanization of it is, like the ASCIIization of whatever language it is, because sometimes they have weird characters that actually just mean a ch, and they type it ch if they're typing in ASCII.
Oh yeah, like in German when you have a vowel with an umlaut, and you either have a keyboard that doesn't let you easily enter an umlaut, or you're just lazy. They do the vowel with an e after it.
Yeah, or Esset in German. Yeah, the two S's instead of the weird B character.
Or in Chinese, where the numbers mean, like the way that you say the numbers in Mandarin is similar to the word. So like there'll be words that are expressed as just numbers that like make no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that, like tying those two things together, I mentioned Wikipedia because that's exactly what I use it for foreign languages.
Cool. Nice.
If I'm pen testing a place that has a primary population in a foreign language that speaks a foreign language, use Cool to scrape Wikipedia with like a max depth of 2 or something on the main page for that language.
Huh. Have you had luck with that?
I have, yeah.
Does that get more hits for like when you have all of the hashes or a bunch of hashes and you're doing like a spray thing, or is that?
So there's kind of 3 scenarios where I end up seeing passwords. There's password spray, which is like the lowest level of access, where I'm trying to get in from nothing. I'm spraying one password against lots of users. And that I'm very, very targeted because I don't want to lock accounts, right? So I'm only going to be trying over the course of a week engagement, depending on the customer, I might only try 5 or 6 passwords, from the outside. On the inside, I'm usually a little more, flexible about that because, you can just query the domain controller for its password policy and say, oh, you only have an observation window of every 30 minutes, so I'll just try one password every 40. And then I can try more passwords.
Do you ever push the lockout? So say you get like 5 attempts before the account gets locked. Would you try every 30 minutes, right? Would you try like 2 or 3, or would you keep it at 1?
I'm very risk averse on that because I've had my wrist slapped for locking a bunch of people out. So I'm typically doing 1 password per observation window plus a little bit, for
per user
outside the observation window per user. because I really don't want to lock out because that gets my boss called, and I don't like it when they call my boss.
I think I'm always surprised at how often normal people screw their password up
Right.
in the course of a day.
So one of the tools that I use is called Domain Password Spray. It's written by my buddy Bo.
Domain. What was it? Domain Pass.
It's just
spray?
Domain Password Spray. It's a PowerShell script, and it queries AD for a list of all users with their lockout count, and that will say, if you give it a password, it will go through. Or if you give it one password, it will go through a list of all the users, remove everyone from the list who's within one of lockout. So that's a way to sort of mitigate that and try to save yourself from yourself by not targeting people who are about to be locked out. But then the second level of passwordness that I was talking about earlier is Kerberoasting, because that's a limited number of users, but I can crack them offline, so I can try a hell of a lot more passwords. And then the top tier cream of the crop password situation is once I've popped domain admin and I have a full ntds.dit. And then I can try all the passwords on a fast hash, and it's all the users, and I find a lot more passwords. That sort of cracking is giving me some fun insights into the way people choose passwords, though. Like, in organizations where the password policy is long, where it says you have to have 15 characters or longer for your password, people use all the same passwords that they did before twice.
Yeah.
So instead of password 1, it's password 1, password 1. Instead of company name bang, it's company name bang, company name bang. It's really interesting, that psychology aspect of it, seeing the different ways that people choose passwords based on the policy, on what is required of them. I think it's cool.
Well, one of the first things, I mean, I think I only took one psychology class ever, and they covered this and this, so it must be mentioned in all early cognitive psychology classes, is the 7 plus or minus 2 thing, right? Where there's some famous research that says humans can only handle 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at a time. And I mean, it doesn't just depend on the person. It's not like some people can always handle 9. It also depends like how much sleep you got, what you ate for breakfast, and so on. Sure. But there's a range from 5 to 9 chunks of information, and anything over that, like, people have trouble remembering. So that comes up in interface design. It comes up in phone numbers. The rule of thumb is like, 6, maybe 7 things you can expect somebody to remember in a sequence, and past that, they're going to look for shortcuts to bring it back down to a reasonable number of chunks. So it actually makes sense that if you have a password policy that requires a 15, 16 character password, people are going to chunk that into something they can actually remember.
The CDB number for that is 665 or 655, insufficient psychological acceptability.
Yeah.
So there's actually like you made your security controls too complex weakness.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's hot right now other than Kerberoasting? And of course Java is always fashionable, apparently.
Yeah, I think Java will be for a while.
Yeah. Well, it has been for a while, and they don't fix much, so therefore, why expect change? Anything else fashionable?
Nothing comes to mind. There's I find that I don't use very many exploits, and when I do, they're typically catastrophic.
Yeah.
So,
crashing things is super noticeable, right? And your odds of crashing something using a random or new exploit, or really, any exploit, is usually pretty good.
Well, I meant more like, if I use an exploit, it gets me into something that wrecks everything. Like,
got it.
Like WebLogic. has gotten me into. So a recent example, I used WebLogic to get onto this web server that had NFS home directories mounted.
Oh.
And then that led to discovering that their NFS server allowed anybody to mount any home directory, which means I got all the SSH keys for every user in the whole org.
Don't.
Like,
NFS is just painful.
And I guess GPG key rings and everything else that goes to
Right.
one of those.
so
Wah, wah.
Can we just like not have NFS anymore? Like, can
no,
we just...
I love NFS. You shut
It's
your
so
phone down.
fast.
I mean, it has version 2 security is based upon TCP/IP. Like, what?
Yes. That's the way Kernigan and Richie did it. That's the way we do it, baby.
I mean, Google Drive and stuff is just as bad, right? I mean, you know, a file mount by any other name.
Yeah.
Do you deal with cloud stuff at all, like cloud pivots, or do you just sort of treat it like it's a regular Linux box?
Occasionally, I don't spend a lot of time on like trying to get into cloud stuff, except when I'm completely outside. If I'm on, if I'm on an actual Red Team engagement where I've got some time to look around, then I will try to get into those sorts of situations. I haven't been super successful with that, and I don't know if it's them or me, but I haven't got a lot of shells on like cloud infrastructure. I have gone from corporate to cloud more frequently. Like pop a Linux box that has a key for AWS, that sort of shit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the sound of our blood sugar dropping, I think, means we should bring this to a close. I want to thank our guest Egypt for being so generous with his time and expertise. I've learned a lot this episode, probably more than usual, and I'm going to apply all of it as soon as possible. I also want to thank you.
In legal mechanisms.
Legal mechanisms, of course. I'll have a get out of jail free card and everything. So it's all on the up and up. And thanks for our editor producer Mitchell, who is starting to roll his eyes at the length of this episode. Every minute we talk is more work for Mitchell. And thanks to Max and Virus. And now more than ever, hacking is not just a crime.
It's a survival trade.
All right.